This week in the Torah, Parshat Vayetze opens with Jacob on the run. He's running away from home, and he reaches a place, and he lays down his head, and God appears in the form of the famous dream that has become known as Jacob's ladder. And Jacob awakens from the dream and says the famous words, Achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh, ve'anochi lo yadati. Vayira vayomer ma nora hamakom hazeh. God is definitely here in this place, and I didn't know it. And he became shaken, and Jacob said, how awesome is this place? I've contemplated these words many times before. I've discussed them in my film Roadmap Genesis. I've taught them at the Fuchsberg Center in Jerusalem to tourist groups. I've reflected on their theological impact, on the words' ramifications. And then this week I was visiting my childhood home in Chicago when the Torah once again proved relevant in my life, once again gave voice to a deep emotion inside of me precisely at the exact moment when I needed to hear that voice. When we think back on our lives, it's as if we flip through pages of photo albums. And our memories are like still frames, photos of brief moments from a time and a place that oftentimes cannot be reconstructed. Not all of the photos are positive, but I'm confident that all of us have at least some positive images in each of our personal photo albums. In the albums, we see people who are often not the same, or perhaps no longer alive on this earth. And the truth is that through circumstance or through decisions we have made, we are no longer the same either. I often think back to a memory of me laying in the family room in our house in Chicago. It was late at night, and my brother and sister had gone to sleep. I couldn't sleep because it was the night before I left for college. And my dad walked into the room and reminded me that we'd have to get up early the next morning for the plane to Los Angeles. I was 17 years old, and I knew that everything was about to change. I was about to leave for LA. What I didn't know was that I would never return to live again in Chicago. I would never come home again in my life without a return ticket to Los Angeles. My life irreparably changed the next morning, perhaps more drastically than I could have ever imagined in that photo. When Blair and I return home with the kids back to Chicago, we stay in the house where I grew up. And Blair and I and the kids all sleep in the guest room together. Now, to appreciate this story I'm about to tell you, you have to understand that in my parents' house, our childhood bedrooms have been maintained as shrines. My bedroom is a museum of my trophies and souvenirs and baseball cards that my children love inspecting as if they were in fact in a museum. There is never a day in Chicago when my kids don't come running down the stairs holding something from my room with the simplest question, Dada, what's this? This trip, for the first time, my son asked to sleep in my room. And so I went to tuck in Simon and sing him the Shema in the bed in which I slept for more than 15 years. And I felt a power in the moment. I felt a power in the tshuva, in the act of returning to the matter at hand, to the photograph that was in my mind. It was like a scene from Back to the Future, and I turned back to the photo of my memory and saw him sleeping in my bed instead of me. And just like Jacob, I thought, how awesome is this place? Because like Jacob, my family had dwelled in that space for many years before. That room is already in my mind as a core memory. And in that moment, when I closed the lights and tucked him in, it was like having an out-of-body experience. It's a miracle. It is in fact a miracle to see something thousands of times in your life and then suddenly see it in a new light. It's nothing less than divine. Godliness is in this place at this moment, and I didn't see it coming. The moment rocked me, and I knew it was awesome. Whenever we return to Chicago, Blair and I become nostalgic. I return to that night on the floor in the family room and question whether I made the right decision. Perhaps we belong in Chicago. And then I turn to Blair, and I know that I came to LA for a reason, and that reason was simply to find her. Had I not moved out here from Chicago, or had she not moved out here from Chicago, then perhaps we would have never met as adults, or perhaps not taken one another quite as seriously as adults when we did meet. Moments are special. Places and times are special. For me as a filmmaker, I love documenting them through video or through photos. I'll never forget when Blair and I took our first vacation to Israel as a married couple, after I wrapped the film Tortured. And we landed and spent several days with a tour guide named Ben-Ami Geller. He was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Israeli Air Force. He exuded Zionism with every fiber of his being. Ben-Ami had been my guide once before, and I wanted him to help show Blair the Israel that I so deeply love. Blair and I traveled through Israel together, our national home. And the place I had spent so many months in my life before that point seemed even more special, knowing that she loved it too. And Israel became even more awesome. One day, Blair and I were walking through the old city of Jaffa, and after a certain period of time, we met Ben-Ami, and I looked out at the view of the sun setting over the magnificent skyline of Tel Aviv. And I asked Ben-Ami to take a picture of Blair and me. And Ben-Ami took several of the worst photographs any human being could possibly take. Only one was salvageable. I was able to crop out his thumb. And then, in his prophetic nature, he told me he had traveled the world several times over. He had spent time on every continent, and he'd seen the world from tens of thousands of feet above the earth. And he asked me if I knew how many photo albums he had at home. I shrugged, and he said emphatically, with his strong Israeli accent, none. He didn't need them. When the moment was special enough, truly, truly awesome, he knew he would remember it forever. I would never have corrected Ben-Ami, but in fact, he had the most awesome photo album of all. He had the ability to remember all those still frames in his life. I'll remember that moment forever as well. I'll remember Blair's beauty, the majestic sunset, my goatee. All of that's captured in the frame photo that sits in our bedroom. But because of the picture, I also remember Ben-Ami's wisdom. I remember the awesome nature of memory. I remember Ben Ami Geller. And that experience allowed me to look at Simon falling asleep in my bed and know that that moment was so awesome and divine that I'd remember it forever. Achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh va'anochi lo yadati. Ma nora hamakom hazeh. How awesome is this place? Life flies by. For me, it seems to be moving faster with every year. When you sense moments that seem divine, try to capture those moments. The awesome moments imbued with the divine spirit, like Jacob's ladder, like Simon sleeping. Try to capture them with your phone or try to capture them with your memory. And then, after you capture them, make sure to cherish them in your heart forever. Shabbat Shalom.